Folks, it is now my great pleasure to introduce Todd Wilms, our speaker for today's webinar. He has been a leader at some of the world's most recognizable brands like SAP, PeopleSoft, VeriSign, PayPal, and IBM. Right now, he is an author of the Amazon bestseller book, Beyond Product. He's an angel investor also and a founder of foundersplace.co. He will tell us about how to recognize your behavioral patterns and to move forward and be a better leader. I'm really excited about what will come next. So without any further ado, meet Todd Wilms.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm excited too. Let's see what comes next, right? I'm also the sole representative for the United States, so I will represent and we'll have a great conversation. Today is all about understanding your leadership potential, your best leadership skills, how to hone those and be better in it. You might think, well, I'm in product management. Maybe I don't really need this, or this isn't something that's going to be valuable to me. I think what people are going to come out of is in three camps. One's going to be, this isn't for me. The second will be, this really gave me something to think about. And the third will be, hey, there's some actionable steps that I want to take here, and I'm going to go start to actually identify my leadership patterns. Honestly, all three of those are great outcomes. And I won't be disappointed if people walk away and say that this isn't for them. But it is an interesting conversation. It's an interesting concept. And I think a lot of leaders that I've talked to really love it. So let's just dive right in. There we go. So there's going to be three main sections that we walk through. And I like giving this up front so people can see exactly what it is we're talking about. The first one is, we really have to understand what leadership is. And there's a great story here called The Thief and the Lemon, which I love telling. And then it helps us identify the tenets of leadership. Then the second piece is really understanding ourselves. Once we understand leadership, how is it that we play a role in here, and what is leadership for us? So we talk a little bit about ancient Greeks and their philosophy. We talk about our strengths and weaknesses, and then I won't identify it, but we talk about the big F. And then what to do about it. We have actionable steps, and then Yuri and I will be taking questions and helping to identify those. So this is how we're going to walk through and actually talk about these concepts. The first thing for us, though, is really to understand the definition of leadership. And what I often see happening is that it's things like, well, when I get the title, or if I get the title, then I could be a leader. And with title, that's sort of the easiest because most people will follow the organizational structure, but it takes a long time to get there and to be effective at it. So title works, but people are responding to the title, not to the person. So I like the second one even better, which is influence without authority. You don't have to have title to start being a leader today. One of the most impactful people, true story, when I was at a company at Newstar, was not the CEO or the executive team. It was the receptionist out front. She had a sense of how to greet people and connect with people that made people feel special, whether they were very serious and very time focused, or whether they were gregarious and a little bit more loose. She adapted herself to them and made them feel welcome into the organization. And every time we'd walk into a meeting, people would say, she's fantastic. Wow, that was so great. A great experience. So she was leading from what we'd call an entry-level position, and she did a fantastic job for the company. So you don't need the title, you can start doing it now. And then the other concept of leadership is, most people think of leadership as leading down, right? I've got a team, I've got people, I'm working with an organization, but you also have to think about leading up. How do you inform people that are above you? Everyone's got someone above you. If you're a CEO, you still report to the board. If you're the chairman of the board, you're still reporting to your investors. You have somebody that's always over your head you have to manage up to. And we need to make sure that up leadership is just as impactful and just as focused on as down. All right, so now that we've established the kind of areas of leadership, let's understand it. This is what I was talking about, this story of the thief and the lemon, and then really getting into the ideas of leadership and what it means for us. All right, so there's this great story, and it's represented by this man down in the lower right. His name is MacArthur Wheeler. And in the mid-90s, MacArthur Wheeler got an idea and decided to rob a couple of banks. And he did so without masks, without gloves, without a getaway car. He just walked in, pointed a gun at the teller, demanded the money, and then went to another bank before he was finally caught. And when he was caught, his exclamation was, "But damn it, I'm wearing the juice." And the cops were like, "What are you talking about, crazy person?" So during the interview, what they found out was MacArthur Wheeler believed that since lemon juice is invisible ink, that he could cover himself in lemon juice and he would be invisible to the cameras. Now, the cops had a great laugh about that, and he ended up serving time. But there were a couple of psychological researchers who picked up on this story and thought, well, there's something really interesting here. And so over a series of a couple of years, they started to look at what makes people believe they're different than they actually are, gives them a better self-esteem. And so that study was called the Dunningkruger Effect. And I'll get into it. It's a little more detailed than this, but that's the portable definition. Dunning-Kruger suddenly became popular when a narcissistic world leader came to power and suddenly believed that everything he said was truth. And so people started writing about this and saying, look, dumb people, people that lack intelligence, actually believe that they're smarter than they are. And for smart people, it's not that they think they're dumb, it's that they think that their intelligence is mirrored with the people around them. They think that people are as smart as they are, and so that they're not different. They don't realize their level of intellect. And what this really comes down to is that we all, everybody, have a difficult time understanding our relative space when it comes to self-esteem. We either think we're smarter than we are, or we think that everybody's at the same level, and that's just patently not true. Now, most people think of this as a story of, yeah, dumb people think they're smart. But when you start looking at it, it comes down to all of us live in a bubble. And that bubble is our perception. That bubble is how we lead, how we interact, how we date, how we engage people. And that level of perception changes how we view leadership. So I love this story and what it's brought us to. And it's this idea that we're the culmination of our experiences. And whatever our experiences are, those are the things that shape us going forward. Now, look, if you're a philosophy geek, you could start to look at this as the idea of determinism. You could also look at it as the idea of free will, and both will play into it. But it's this concept that you are the sole benefit of the experiences that you've had in your life. And those things shape you. And so because of that, your ideas of leadership are sort of one size fits all, but that doesn't work because leadership is contextual, right? The way you lead going into a startup that you're the fifth employee is very different than going into what I've done for a large portion of my career, companies like SAP that have 60,000 employees and 3,500 marketers around the world. Trying to find your place in that is very different than I'm going into a startup. So we have to understand that our idea of leadership is based on our prior experiences and that we need to adapt those to the leadership style that's needed around us. Now, I think all of us could go back and look at a leader and say, here's somebody that I had that was a boss or a manager or someone early on that was a terrible example of this. I think we've all had those horror stories of people that used their own personal style, whether it fit for the company or not. And it's because they weren't either self-involved or there was something else masking it. There was some problem that they had internally that didn't allow them to evolve their idea of leadership. So this is where we're going to start getting into the concepts of leadership. First, we have to understand ourselves. So as we talked about this whole idea of leadership being contextual, and there's a pull from us to be the leaders that we have as our experience. And those things often come into conflict. And the way to unlock that is to have a better sense of yourself and figure out what things are holding you back. So here we'll talk about a little bit about the Greeks because this philosophy is not new. It's been around since at least 500 BC. Talk about our strengths and weaknesses, and then we'll get into the big F, which starts to bring this all together. So the idea here is you have to constantly know yourself. Now, what's interesting is a lot of people will look and say, well, I know who I am, and they evaluate that, and that becomes their constant. And that constant is what they have through the rest of their life. At 25, I am this type of a person. And so therefore, I just move along through life, not ever reevaluating myself or reevaluating what it is that I need to do. And so you can become stuck in this idea, but really self-evaluation, understanding yourself, understanding your changes, understanding your values, all those things need to happen almost continuously. And I wouldn't say every day, right? If you're waking up and reevaluating yourself every day, that's a problem. But what really needs to happen is that we have this evaluation at several standing points in our life, and to reevaluate and figure out who we are and what we stand for. Now, most people don't do this. And that's why we've had really bad leaders in the past. You've had those people that just didn't fit into the organization. Instead of being a leader, they were a boss. They were dictatorial. They were mean-spirited. And it's because they've never really reevaluated themselves and looked at what kind of leader they are and what kind of leader they need to be. They just coasted on their own ideas. So there's this great quote, and it's Heraclitus, and it's a man never steps in the same river twice. Right now, today we would say a person never steps in the same river twice, but I use the original quote. The idea here is you look at it and go, well, okay, I guess that's true. But the principle is you're never the same person, and it's never the same river. And so every time you walk into a situation, you have to realize that you're different than you were 2 years ago, 6 months ago, 10 years ago. You also have to realize that the position, the role, is different. You might be in a startup and it might have the same amount of people, and it might have the same market cap. It might have the same level of funding. It might have all the things that are the same, but each one of those things is different. Subtleties in go-to-market strategies, subtleties in product experience, and how you connect with customers. All those things will cause you to reevaluate what kind of leader you're going to be. So you can't have a playbook per se. And this leads us to this idea again of leadership is contextual. Everything's going to be different, and you have to reevaluate. And the only way you can really do this is to understand yourself. You have to understand what your motives are and understand the things that are blocking your path. Right? So the pieces that I've kind of walked us through are, first, it's this idea of understanding leadership, understanding your own leadership style and what that looks like, and then really getting into the heart of understanding yourself and what does that mean. So this leads us to this question. What I'd love to know from all of you is, as you think about it, what's your greatest strength today? So we can do it, Yuri, we can do it in Slido, we can do it here on chat. Chat's probably easiest. Yeah, but I'd love for some people to just start throwing some chat in on their belief of what their greatest strength is. And we'll give that a minute.
Okay, folks, please share your greatest strength with us. You can just type anything you want in the chat of the Zoom, and we will see what will pop up.
By the way, there's no wrong answer.
Yeah.
All of your answers are personal, and they can be in leadership, they can be in relationships, they can be personal, they can be external, whatever it is, but find those things that you think this is the hallmark of what makes me me.
Okay, communication skills, empathy, experience again, ability to roll out sleeves and start doing things. Hey, yeah, that's a good.
These are great.
Okay.
Oh, I like this, being able to see the joy and beauty in life every day.
Yeah, that's the tough one, actually.
That can be challenging. Okay. Don't mind failures, making the right decision. Common sense. Common sense. Don't underestimate it. Storytelling. Fantastic.
Yeah. Ability to negotiate.
Okay. We'll give this another couple of seconds, and I think most people have responded that are going to.
Yeah.
So of the couple of things I see here, I see things like, so empathy, tenacity, that's the ability to roll up your sleeves, keeping an eye for new ideas, so that flexibility, communication skills, storytelling, the like, again, this idea of persistence, of being able to shake off failure and move forward, that tenacity again, the ability to be flexible and navigate. And then, you know, the common sense, or being able to look at the bright side of things and always look for joy in life, that sense of optimism. So these are all fantastic strengths, and they're some that I embody myself, and there's some that I see in the people around me. So those strengths are fantastic. But here we're going to talk about where those strengths can actually serve you wrong. And this is that sense of knowing yourself and understanding what it is that's getting in your way. So your greatest weakness is your strength one step too far. Right? Now, I'm not picking on anybody, but I'll go through a couple of those examples. If you're optimistic, then your greatest weakness is your sense of trust and optimism in the world. If you become too trusting, and therefore you can run into circumstances where you get burned by that behavior. Your tenacity may lead to stubbornness. Your empathy for others may forego goals and objectives for the organization and focus more for the individuals around you. For any strength you have, there's something that leads to that sense of weakness. And it's this idea of, I've got this thing that I hold on to, that I cherish, that is the definition of me. It's the strength that I have. And so I am going to go ahead and use that to my advantage. And even if you think my strength is my experience, well, then that experience might keep you from looking at new experiences, understanding new ventures, understanding and evaluating your future. Those things might hold you back. Now, if you keep your strength in check, your strength is fantastic, and you should embody that. But if you start to lose yourself in that strength, and that strength becomes overpowering, it turns into your greatest weakness. And this is a concept that seems to be at odds with a lot of people. But this idea that if you take things one step too far, think about this for anything. If I'm tenacious and I'm like, I will do whatever it takes to get the job done, well, that keeps me, if I go too far, from really understanding, hey, wait a minute, it's time to stop this project. It's time for us to reevaluate. I'm going to go and look for everything I can to make sure that this thing works, even to the point where I'm the only one doing it. There's a diminishing return on my value that I add to the product or the service or the organization. Now, I'm not going to ask people to go in and share their weakness when it comes to their strength, right? That's a personal evaluation, but that's something that you really need to understand about yourself. What is it that happens to me if I take my greatest thing and go a little too far with it, if I don't stop and keep it in check? And that's going to become your greatest weakness. And the advantage that you have is now understanding what that is. That little bit of self-awareness of understanding what your weakness is, combined with your strength, keeps you in check and helps you really understand yourself and understand what's motivating you and what's driving you forward. And that is a higher level of self-awareness than 99.99999% of the population around the world has. And so these are the types of things that you can use to start unlocking your leadership potential, is to understand those things that are holding you back and keeping you from being a great leader. So it may be as simple as and this is me personally, I have tremendous empathy. I have a very high EQ. I understand people, I empathize with them, and I use that to bring the best of people out around me and build amazing teams. And that's been a tenet of my career to this day. I also can be overturned on empathy, and now I start looking at the benefit of the individuals instead of looking at the benefit of the organization. I become too micro-focused and not enough macro-focused. And I've seen that play out a few times in my career, where I've gone to bat for people when it was a lost cause, and it actually hurt me and the team as we were going about our business because we lost credibility in the organization. Now, that empathy comes from personal experience, right? I was raised in an empathetic family. And so that becomes my leadership style. My leadership style is my ability to empathize. But then I've gone into some organizations where they didn't need empathy. They didn't want empathy. What they wanted was a strong leader to come in and set the tone and set the direction. And they were off put when I would ask them questions about their lives or ask them questions about what they do outside of work, because I was trying to get to know them in my own leadership style. Huge failure, right? And that company didn't last very long, but it was a great benefit for me after I got through the pain of that experience. It was a great benefit for me to be able to figure out how I'm going to go move forward. Okay, so enough on that. Let's start talking about the big F, right? The big F is fear. Fear's at the heart of all of this, right? The reason why you have this strength is because there's something that's fear-based, way deep down, that's driving you to do this. This is the thing that you say, I'm going to be empathetic because I have this in my natural skill set, and I'm afraid that if I'm not empathetic, then I won't know how to lead people, and I won't be comfortable in doing it, and I'll be a failure. Now, you might not intellectualize those, and you may not even realize them. You may not pay any attention to it. And the majority of time, that's probably okay. But fear really is at the heart of all these things that make your strengths, your weakness, and define your leadership style. And identifying your fear, which is challenging, don't get me wrong, identifying your fear is going to be the thing that propels you to be a better leader, because you're going to be a better person and you're going to understand yourself better than anybody. So this idea here of what drives fear, well, fear could be from trauma. It could be from prior experiences. It could be a mental health issue. It could be depression, anxiety, whatever. It could be a lack of self-worth. It could be a feeling that you're not good enough, right? All those things are driving fear, and it creates certain things in your life, right? So some of the most arrogant people that I've seen and met, and believe me, there are tons of arrogant people here in Silicon Valley. Most of them are combating some fear, right? Fear of not measuring up. They look at money as the thing that defines them. And then they've gone through 4 marriages and their kids won't talk to them, but they've got a lot of money. There's some fear that's driving them. And I'm not saying it's with everybody, but the vast majority of people, their arrogance, their stubbornness, their desire to be a wallflower, anything can be driven by fear. And if you don't understand that fear and understand the heart of it, again, it cascades into how you become a better leader. Right? So at this stage, I hope we've walked through and you're following me along with, I know what a leader is. I now know what my personality traits are and where my role plays in that. I know my strengths and weaknesses, and I know that there's some sort of fear that's identifying there. Now, you don't have to know what that fear is right now, and it may take you years to identify. You may discard this entire presentation and say, I don't want to evaluate my fear. All of those are okay. I'm presenting you with options and things to look at and how to redefine your leadership skills. So this, just like I did the sort of portable analysis for Dunningkruger, right? Dumb people think they're smart and smart people think they're dumb. I love this as a definition of fear because it's very portable and it helps you understand sort of these 3 stages of fear. Now, a lot of people, certainly out here, will say they're fearless. You know, I'm a fearless person. I go in and tackle and charge headfirst into the fray, and I'm the first person to go in and get stuff done. I have no fear, and I call bullshit. Everybody, I mean, everybody has some fear. The role it plays is different, right? And what that fear is different, but everybody has some fear. So anybody that says they're fearless, they're exaggerating and they're masking for something else. Because fear really exhibits itself in these 3 stages. And while you might be thinking of it as, well, I'm an entrepreneur, I don't have any fear because I'm going to go out there and start stuff. I don't have a problem at the beginning. Well, they're going to have fear at the middle or at the end. So let's kind of walk through what these are. And they're pretty simple concepts, but it helps us to identify fear as not just idea of fear, but stages of fear. So the first one's the beginning, right? It's this idea that you have a fear to fail. It's, I'm not going to start something. I'm too old. I don't think that's going to be a benefit to me. You make excuses. And for entrepreneurs, I'll tell you, the most miserable people that I've met are entrepreneurs that have that entrepreneurial spirit and they're not exhibiting it. Something's holding them back. That fear is holding them back. They have this desire, this calling to go do something that's their own and something that they believe will be valuable to the world, but fear is holding them back. And they're miserable people because they have this dream and vision and they have this drive to do it and they can't get there. Now with with fear in the beginning, it's really about a fear of failure. If I don't ever start something, I don't ever fail. And that's a very safe place to be. But if you have a desire to start something, you have to overcome that fear and understand that there's something great waiting for you on the other side. How long it takes you to get there is anybody's guess, and it's based on each personal experience. But there's something on the other side that leads to something great for yourself if you have the willingness and you can overcome the fear to do it. Okay, second one, fear of change. Fear of change falls into sort of two examples, and one it's to change wildly and one it's to change not at all. So the first one is, we call it overly pivoting. You see this in a lot of organizations where the product's not quite working. You'll see this in product management. Product's not working, so the CEO comes in and goes, wait a minute, I've got this great idea. Why don't we, and you pivot and do something else. Oh, this isn't working for this market, let's go over here. And then 2 days later, they're like, wait a minute, I have this great idea again, let's go this way. And then they talk to somebody the night before, and whatever that person said is the direction that they want to go. They waffle wildly because they're uncomfortable with their idea that the direction that they've set will actually work. The other one is, it's sunk cost fallacy. It's this idea that I've invested in it, and come hell or high water, I'm going to make it happen. So a CEO or a leader of any kind might look at this and say, everything that I've done has led me to believe that this is the right thing to do. And all data to the contrary tells me that this is what I'm doing going forward, right? It's an old joke of whatever the behavior is on Monday, they'll have the same behavior on Wednesday, regardless of what happens on Tuesday. No matter what comes into their lives and helps them to try and change that idea, they're stubborn and they won't. So both of these are going to cause you to have this fear of change in the middle, that once you've started an organization, you've started a product, you started bringing it to market, you're going to have this fear to either go all over the place and spin wildly out of control, or to hold your path regardless of the data. And then the last one is fear of success. Now, there's a recent psychological study that said the fear of success mimics PTSD. And most people would look at this and go, wait a minute, why fear of success? You know, if I could suddenly sell a company and get all the money that I ever desired, if I could go in and grow it and be part of a bigger organization, if I could have all those dreams come true, why would I be upset by that? Why would I be fearful of that? The reality is, most people look at this and say, they're so terrified of finally getting to that piece of success that they freeze up at the last couple of yards. So if you think about this as, I hate sports analogies, but I'll use this one, playing football as an American style football, you know, running into this great touchdown, and the last couple of yards, you're worried about being tackled. I see this with executives all the time, where they'll start to waffle. I mean, just stop doing anything when they're just getting ready to sell the company, when they're just ready to have that exit event, when they're just ready to win that first customer. And the belief comes from, I've done all these great things along the way to get me to this point, and I don't want to screw it up. And so they come to a place of indecision. And I didn't understand this earlier in my career, when I'd see CEOs just kind of freeze and stop doing stuff, if not even disappear. And it's because they didn't want to screw up on those last steps. Another thing that happens too is, okay, so what do I do after I get everything I want? What do I do after that exit event? What do I do after I find that I'm successful? Well, a lot of people would say, well, I can go do anything I want. But for most people, it's this idea of, I'm afraid of getting everything I want. I'm fearful that this event's going to happen, and what am I going to do? What's the next step for me? If you're an entrepreneur, you're thinking, okay, I got to go start this all over again. I'm not ready to retire. You know, most entrepreneurs I know that have had big exit events go in and start something new. A lot of people would say, I'm going to go buy a Hawaiian island and go hang out there. I'm going to go, you know, buy a ranch someplace and be comfortable there. A lot of people aren't happy with that. And so they're struggling to figure out what their identity is after this. Now, a simple way of looking at this is, think about a big company you've been with that has brand affinity. People know the name, and when you walk to people at a party and you say, I work for so-and-so, they're like, oh, that's cool. And then you go to a company that doesn't have that. Your identity might have been wrapped up in the brand or the role or the position that you had, And now you've gone into something else, which you think is a better position and a better direction, but it doesn't have that same cachet, that same oomph that you had at other places. And so now you're going through this transition of, I had it, now I don't. And there's some sort of fear backing that decision, that direction. So don't think of fear as just this one thing, one size fits all. Fear hits us at each of these different stages. And it doesn't mean that you're fear of the middle, you're always fear of the middle. It doesn't mean if fear of success, you're always fear of success. This changes throughout your life. And I will tell you, even personally, I've been talking on this for a couple of years now. I've realized even late in my career that there was fear playing a role for me that I had never seen before, or never understood before. So even though I'm keenly aware of this and I'm talking about it, and I'm thinking about this on an almost daily basis, fear snuck into my life and kept me from really starting something and really evolving something the way that I wanted to, because I was afraid to be able to go in and do that. And I did half measures along the way. So fear can hit you at any time, any place, and it's absolutely there. Okay, so now you've identified your strengths and weaknesses. You understand that there's some fear behind it, fear that's driving those decisions. So what do you do with it, right? This would be all well and good if I just left it here, but then you'd be saying, okay, great, now I know that there's some fear in my life. What the hell am I supposed to do with it? So I love this quote here from Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell, if you don't know, wrote this book, The Man of a Thousand Faces, and he really talks to us about this idea of storytelling. And storytelling, from everything from The Wizard of Oz to Star Wars, was George Lucas's affinity for Joseph Campbell. And it's the general story of, you go through these stages in life. If you think about Star Wars as the movie, it's you're minding your own business, some catastrophe happens in life, you go up against the evil villain, you fail, a mentor comes in to help you, you right size whatever is going on, and then you become successful, you become the Jedi, whatever. And you'll see this pattern play out in history. And Campbell really summed it up with this idea, this quote, right? We must be willing to get rid of the life we plan so that we can have the life that's waiting for us. Now, it sounds like an easy concept, terribly hard to do, because that idea of getting rid, right, letting the stuff go and allowing yourself to be happy in the thing you're really meant to be is challenging for most people. And even describing this to people when I've given talks, you can see a visible physical reaction, you know, almost like heartburn, where people are like, oh God, it just makes them uncomfortable just even thinking about it. So now what do we do about it, right? Actionable steps. Okay, so there's 4. And I'll walk you through as much as we can to get you to understand and how to take truly actionable steps. So the first was understanding your strengths and weaknesses, right? You got to know both of these, and you have to really identify what they are. Now, you don't have to commit these to short-term memory. You don't need to walk around with them every day. You don't need to wake up in the morning and go, I am strong at this and I am weak at this. But you need to have this understanding of where these strengths and weaknesses play in your life. And even knowing what they are puts you far ahead of what anybody else is seeing in the marketplace. All right, hard part. It's the role of fear. Understanding your fears and admitting them even to yourself is tremendously challenging. And I will not underestimate what people have to go through to figure out their fears. Now you might scratch the surface and say, yeah, okay, I'm afraid of failure. Or, you know, I'm afraid of making a change in my life. And that's fine. But really understanding where that fear is coming from, right? Is it a friend of mine has a fear of financial security, no matter how wealthy she is. It's because her parents were bankrupt as a child, and she knows that feeling of insecurity, what money can do or not do for you. And so that fear has sort of dictated her life going forward. Now she's aware of it and knows it and is doing things to combat it, but it's a long process. And at least she became aware of it later in life to say, oh, this thing in my past is driving this thing in my future. So understanding your fears and really understanding them and getting to the heart of them is hard, but it becomes easier when you know your strengths and weaknesses, and you can start to look at, okay, why are these things my strengths and weakness? What's the thing behind it that's driving those things, my positives and my negatives? This last one is a mindset, and I think it's extremely powerful. Most people that I meet, especially here in Silicon Valley, they're like, I am not afraid. I have no fear. We've talked about this before. And they think of fear, if they do have it, as something that needs to be conquered. I used to be afraid of public speaking, but I'm over that. I used to be afraid of asking for money, but I'm over that. And the way they approach it is they're combating it. They're fighting it. They think of it like cancer. They think of it as this thing that you have to fight and combat. And I say that's the wrong approach to think about fear. Fear is your ally. Fear is that warning sign, that early warning stage that says, wait a minute, something's not right here. Something's uncomfortable. When you're feeling that sense of fear and you're like, wait a minute, I'm nervous about going and speaking on stage, or I'm nervous about starting this new job, or I'm nervous about speaking up to my boss, that fear is the thing that's saying, hold on a second, something's off here. And it starts to have you, or at least allow you, the opportunity to start evaluating, why is that happening? What's your real fear here? Everyone's afraid to get up and talk, right? I do it professionally and I get the jitters 10 minutes, 15 minutes before any presentation. And it was certainly the case this morning. But I really sat down and looked at it and said, fear for me there was fear of making a fool of myself. Well, why is that fear of making a fool of yourself? Well, it's because I don't have the self-worth, maybe. I don't think I'm good enough, that I could survive something not being perfect. And so those fears drive you for whatever your decisions. Now, I can't tell you what your fear is, but if you walk through these steps, you can start to see your fears and then start to identify it as, wait a minute, this is an early warning sign. This is an ally. It's not a friend, but it's not something you need to combat. It's a way of identifying what's going on in your life. All right, now, unfortunately, this next one is, this is where I leave you, because I can't be your psychologist. I can't be your your confidant. Certainly you could hire me to be your mentor, but this is where you need to go through and start to figure this out. Okay, I have this fear of something. Even identifying it is such a powerful, engaging experience. And it takes real courage, and don't ever underestimate that. If you can go through these steps, hats off to you. I'm so impressed, because understanding your fear and what's holding you back is something that most people do not do or ever think about. So for you to go on this path, like 5 stars, amazing, well done. Now it's figuring out how to combat that. And it might just be the awareness of it, just being aware that I have a fear of around X. It might be sitting down and really looking at it and saying, okay, where's this fear holding me back? Is it holding me back from really being a great leader? Is it holding me back because I won't ever speak up to my boss because I'm afraid of him or her? Is it holding me back because, frankly, I believe, like the Dunningkruger Effect, I think everybody has the same idea I have, and so they must know something I don't. Suffered from that one for quite a while early in my career. Wait a minute, why am I the only one that has this idea? And I know I'm right, but I must be mistaken. There's something wrong with me. I don't know something that they must know. So all of those fears start to play a role, and it absolutely cascades into your personal life, into your professional life, into your communal life, into a spiritual life. All of those fears start to hold you back. How you deal with them and where you deal with them is extremely personal. But there's resources out there, there's professional assistance, there's mentors and guides. But it's you really going and figuring out and having this journey to figure out what's holding me back and how can I start to move forward. So again, we've walked through all these stages of leadership, your role in leadership, then how to identify those things that are holding me back. What are those strengths and weaknesses? How does that lead to fear? And then what do I do about that fear that ultimately cascades up and helps me to become a better leader? Again, I will reiterate, this is not easy stuff. Most people don't do this. They fall into their own habits and identify those and move them forward. But for you, just being able to go through these simple steps and start to look at these things puts you well ahead of the curve. And over a period of years, you can start to figure out how this impacts you. And then you're constantly reevaluating yourself along the way. All right, so this is our time for questions. If you're interested in reaching out to me, I made it really simple. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram are Todd M. Wilms. You can reach me at toddmwilms@gmail. You can reach me at foundersplace.co. And if you're really interested, you can go onto LinkedIn and look at my profile, and my phone number is there. I will take calls. I make this offer for phone calls from people, and people seldom take me up on it. I'm happy to sit down and spend a couple of minutes to answer any questions with you directly. I'm an actual person, and so I can get on the phone and talk to people along the way. So I hope this was valuable. I'm interested in seeing some of the questions, Yuri, that we've gotten, what things have piqued people's interest, and let's spend a few minutes to go over that now. So Yuri, lead me.
Great, great. Thank you, Todd, for such an insightful presentation. We have questions, and folks, I remind you, you can ask more on slido.com. I put the link, let me just repost it again to the chat. You can also vote for questions that are already there. Here is a message in the chat, slido.com, event code 0023. Okay, let's start. The first question is from the anonymous. Is there any system for re-evaluation yourself?
For evaluating yourself?
Re-evaluation.
Re-evaluating yourself. Is there any system for it? So it really is a couple of things. It's at these pivotal life-changing moments in your life are certainly a time for you to go in and reevaluate, right? COVID lockdown for most people has given you the sense to slow down and have a reevaluation. The world's going to change moving forward. And so whether we like it or not, the things we've done don't necessarily fall into the same playbook. So right now is a great time for reevaluation in yourself and who you are going to be going forward, because the market's going to change, right? It's that same man, same river twice concept. World's going to change. Things are going to be different. You can't stay the same. You're going to have to evolve. There's also certain points in your life I found between jobs, between even relationships, where I've gone in and gone, wait a minute, why did that go south? What happened? It doesn't mean that you have to go in and do this like full immersive, go to a yoga retreat or see a shaman and go to a sweat lodge. It just means having these opportunities to sit down and say, what happened? Like, to be self-actualized. There are tests that you can take. So there's a series of things like, you know, Myers-Briggs and those personality tests to give you a sense of who you are. There's a little bit of pop psychology in those because they don't ever quite fully get to the base of who you are. There are a couple of tests that if you're interested, I'll send you some links. So anybody can email me or reach out and I'll provide you some links of what some of those tests are. Most of them are free. And they're also kind of fun to take them and get a sense of, you know, how you rate and how you evaluate yourself. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, great, thank you. That's actually a fun question in the chat. The question, as author said, the question is a bit off top, but it's interesting. What about free will? Does it exist from your point of view?
It is a fun question, and it's a great question, and we could probably spend the next half hour talking about it. So I won't do it justice. I used to fully believe in free will, but now I'm believing in this idea of determinism. And I don't know how far with determinism I go, but there's really something to be said about all the things or the experiences that I've had in my past lead me to the next decision that I make. And it's almost inevitable that the way I'm created, the way I'm crafted, leads me to a natural next place. Now, there's a long series of discussions on why that is and why that can be, and how that's actually not free will. It's deterministic based on who we are. And there's a really healthy debate that's been going on for centuries as to which ones those exist in. There's this concept of the multiverse, which is there's a billion different, untold, infinite number of universes, and all these things are happening simultaneously. And so there's a infinite number of people that are talking me right now that have different outcomes. And this is just the outcome that we see. It gets pretty deep and it gets pretty detailed. Whether you believe in these philosophies or not, whether you find one that really is the thing you hold to, it's truly understanding that your experiences actually drive a majority of the decisions and behaviors. The fact that I was raised in an empathetic family lead me to naturally want to be more empathetic. And that is going to be the decision-making process that I have that maybe is some free will, but a lot of it's just based on who I am and what I stand for. You have these abilities, these points in time to reevaluate yourself and to change your deterministic nature, but it's definitely a challenge, and I really love the question.
Yeah, great. Have you seen the Devs show?
Oh, Devs is great.
Yeah, it's actually a lot. There's a lot of thoughts on that.
Yeah.
deterministic and multiverse.
I love a show that makes you think and it's wrapped up in a mystery and it pushes your boundaries, right? Devs is fantastic.
Okay. Okay. So the next most voted question, what was the pivot or changing point of your career in your leadership style? The reason, how you acted, and what lesson you learned?
Yeah. So again, really, really good question. So the biggest thing for me was I was working at big brand companies and I was a cog in a very large wheel. And it was a relatively cushy job in that regard where I could stay at these companies and you could make a career out of it. There's plenty of people that have worked at SAP or IBM or PayPal that have been there for 20 plus years and that's been their career. And I just couldn't see myself doing that. And so the biggest change was overcoming that fear of, wait a minute, I'm in this really comfortable environment, but I'm not happy. I've got to go off and do something else. And so I wanted to be closer to the action. I wanted to be closer to customers. I wanted to really understand how things were working. And I was drawn to entrepreneurism, but fear was holding me back. And so when I finally made that leap, I got a masterclass with working with these entrepreneurs and VCs. And that led me to write this book. And the book led me to being able to be an executive coach, advisor for CEOs and board members that to some degree I talk about the philosophy of it, but I also help them with their go-to-market strategies. I become very tactical if they need it. But I find a lot of time I'm just couch time for them because it's lonely at the top and they need somebody that they can confide in to help them understand themselves and to move things forward. So that simple step of, wait a minute, I need to reevaluate myself because this just isn't working for me, to overcoming that fear and going off and doing something else. And at many times panicking along the way, going to my friends and going, this isn't working. It's not going to happen. It's not real for me. And they always said, just wait it out. It's going to take some time, but you're going to get there. I'm confident of it. And then finally getting to the other side and realizing it's made me a different person. It's a different role for me. I'm more confident going in and talking to CEOs and board members. I can actually have those conversations now and say what's on my mind and hold it true and not feel like I'm couching things or holding back on things. So again, my own personal story, but it does exist out there.
Okay, great, thank you. What would your advice to fight fears effectively?
And I understand the question, and I hate to get a little persnickety here, but again, it's not looking to fight, but it's looking to understand fear, right? And to acknowledge it. So a couple of things. Part of it's this process, right? Of really getting to the place where you understand what your fear is, right? You have to identify it first. And then from that, again, it's this idea of it's an early warning system, right? When you start to feel fear for whatever reason, fear is that part of our DNA. It's the thing that says, wait, there's rustling in the leaves. That must be a tiger. Or rustling in the field, right? Is it the wind or is it something out to kill me? It's that idea that there's something going on that you're uncomfortable with. So it does become this early warning system, and it's built into all of us. And we haven't shaken that part of ourselves. So once you understand that fear, even just the awareness of it is a huge step forward. But the ways to start identifying it is, look, if this is something that you think you need professional help or you need a mentor for, absolutely bring that person into your life and have that objective third-party point of view that can help you steer through this. If it's something that you look at and say, wait a minute, I can start to identify it, and that becomes that system for me to say, now I've got fear, what does it mean and how do I act differently than I've done in the past? How do I have the courage to do that? And believe me, overcoming your fear is not an easy task. You have the courage to do it, then at least you've got that opportunity available to you that you didn't have before.
Okay, great. Thank you. I guess for the next question, we touched this topic several times in other questions, but still, is there any exercise to understand what motivates you?
Exercise to understand what motivates you. So to some degree, I think it's understanding the things that don't motivate us but we believe that they are, right? So if we go back to this idea of experiences, right? If you understand that your parents or your surroundings or your upbringing or early leaders in your life have led you to believe that blank is the motivator, right? Money is the end all be all. Community is the end all be all. Being liked is more important than being right. Like all of those things become your motivations because that's what you were taught. And what I think you'll find is as you reevaluate yourself over time, and even if you do it today, you're going to start to see that those motivations don't hold true anymore. When I was younger, money was the sole motivator. It's not the sole motivator for me today. And I've evolved with that over time and really shed some of the belief systems that I was taught early on, because ultimately I've made money and been successful and it doesn't make me happy. What makes me happy is helping others around me to unlock and be the best self that they can be, to make these CEOs and advisors, or to hopefully help, you know, even one person on this call to start to evaluate themselves and see the real genius that you all have, the strengths that you have. So our motivations will ultimately change. Hopefully they change, if not naturally, with a little bit of coaxing from ourselves, but it's really sitting down and saying, do I believe this to be true? You know, my parents want me to make money. Is that what I really believe in? And evaluating that and coming to grips with it. Again, not an easy task, but I think just being aware of it and starting to ask yourself those questions is the right first step.
Great, thank you so much. Folks, thank you so much too for all the questions, but we are running out of time a bit, so I guess we'll take one more. And I guess for an example, we can take more practical one. How do you see the idea of fear in hiring and firing people? So what?
And hiring and firing. Oh, yeah. That's a good one. That is a good one. So it's funny because your individual fears lead you into these decisions on whether to bring somebody on board or not. And we also tend to bring people in that exemplify who we are, right? So I'll go on me. If I'm highly empathetic, I'm going to be drawn to somebody who's highly empathetic and engages with me in the conversation. And there's that unintended bias there, but it absolutely exists because we're a product of our experiences and we want people around us that are like that. And you can forgo really good talent, right? If I'm looking for an analyst, I don't necessarily need somebody that's gregarious, right? I want somebody who's going to be focused and methodical, and that's their core skill. But if I'm looking at hiring people that are more in the mold of me and not really thinking about it, not being even aware that I'm doing it, I'm going to miss out on some really good talent, and I'm going to make mistakes on hiring people along the way. On firing people, your fear absolutely plays a role, right? Because you can start to look at it and say, do I give this person a chance, and am I able to mentor and steer them along the path? And don't get me wrong, there's some people that are destined to be fired, right? No matter what you do, it's just not going to work. It's something in their behavior. It's something ingrained. It could be anything. Ultimately, you have to let some people go. But along the way, you have to decide, are you willing to invest in that person, and how, and what does that look like? And I know a lot of managers I've had in my past that are so afraid of looking bad that as soon as somebody starts to drift in any way, shape, or form, they actually push them in that direction and get rid of them because they don't want this reflecting bad on them. And so they can always say, you know, we had some problems, but, you know, Yuri just didn't work out for us. And so now I've got to push Yuri out of the equation. Sorry. I've got to push him out of the equation because then everything's been solved. It's not me, it's them. And fear absolutely plays a role in that. So yeah, it does. It plays a very, very strong role. And that's an awesome question. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Todd, for answering. And folks, thank you so much for joining us and staying with us. We really appreciate it. And Todd, I'm very grateful for you giving this presentation. It was really insightful for me, and I guess for all the folks that joined us. Is there anything you wanted to tell us before we end?
No, I guess I just wanted to lead with, you know, the sincere offer to reach out to me in any way, and I'll do my best to get back to you and connect with you, and we can see where it goes. But I also want to just thank you. Your time's really valuable. Everyone that joined this call spent time out of their day. They could have been doing a myriad of other things. So I'm grateful that you joined, and I'm grateful that you stayed. There must be something along the way that was piquing your interest, and you invested your time in it. So I'm appreciative of you putting all your time, effort, and energy to listen to what I had to say. So thank you very much.
Great. Okay, that's it, folks. See you. And don't see. I hope see you too soon. Maybe next year. I don't know.
Yeah, next year
in live.
Me out. We're gonna make it. We're gonna make it happen. I'm confident.
Sure. Okay. Great. Bye bye.
All right. Thanks all.